In 1888, the last sane year of Nietzsche's life, he produced two brief but devastating books, Twilight of the Idols and The Antichrist. Originally titled The Idle Hours of a Psychologist, it was renamed Twilight of the Idols, or How to Philosophize with a Hammer, by a recommendation of Peter Gast, who urged him to find something more splendid. It offers a lightning tour of his whole philosophy, preparing the way for the Antichrist, a final assault on institutional Christianity. As Nietzsche was starting to become recognized, he felt that he needed a short text that would serve as an introduction to his thought. In a letter he wrote, "This style is my philosophy in a nutshell, radically up to criminal." The book is divided into 12 sections. In the foreword, Nietzsche speaks of a grand declaration of war on all the prevalent ideas of his time. He uses the word idols in the title of his book to refer to the worship of false ideas of God. He seeks to philosophize with a hammer and gently tap or sound out these idols in order to receive that hollow sound which speaks of false and empty ideas of gods that we idolize. The book starts off with his maxims and arrows, which include some of his most celebrated quotes. Which is it? Is man only God's mistake, or God only man's mistake? What does not kill me makes me stronger. If we possess our why of life, we can put up with almost any how. Without music, life would be a mistake. In The Problem of Socrates, Nietzsche asserts that ancient philosophers had shared a common belief that life is worthless. He criticized that the consensus of the wise is proof of truth. He holds Socrates in special contempt. The dialectic or Socratic method is an expression of revolt, born out of the resentment of the rabble. He challenges the Socratic equation, reason equals virtue equals happiness. Nietzsche values instinct over reason, since happiness and instinct are one. He uses the French word décadence or decadence various times throughout the book, describing systems of thought that spring from illness and weakness, such as the formula of rationality at any cost, in opposition to instincts. In the next essay, titled Reason in Philosophy, Nietzsche called reason as the cause of our falsification of the evidence of the senses. Philosophers escaped from the senses, which they believed deceived us from the real world. Nietzsche says that the apparent world is the only one, the real world has only been lyingly added. If one is to accept a non-sensory, unchanging world as superior and our sensory world as inferior, one is adopting a hatred of nature and thus a hatred of the sensory world, the world of the living. Nietzsche goes on to attack Christianity and the concept of heaven, a similar concept to Plato's idea of the world of forms, a changeless, eternal world. The tendency to divide the world into real heaven and the apparent living world makes people despise this life. Therefore, it is a suggestion of decadence, of declining life. He praises the pre-Socratic Heraclitus and his idea of becoming, an ever-present change or flux which had a major impact on his philosophy. The next section, How the Real World at Last Became a Myth, is a fascinating one. Nietzsche demonstrates the process by which myth and storytelling are of greater importance than the direct experience of reality. The idea suggests that we may doubt our senses when it conflicts with fiction. It contains 6 stages outlining the history of an era. The first 4 are a devaluation of an ideal. In Platonism, the real world is attainable through wisdom. In Christianity, it is attainable at death. In Kant, it is beyond human knowledge, and in positivism, knowledge of this world suffices. The last 2 stages are Nietzsche's revaluation of an ideal. He describes the real world as a useless idea and calls for a revaluation of all values, embodied in the image of Zarathustra, the zenith of mankind, the ultimate yes-sayer. In Morality as Anti-Nature, Nietzsche reiterates the importance of a healthy morality dominated by an instinct of life. Anti-natural morality, however, is what had always been taught, turning against the instincts of life, becoming enemies of life. Nietzsche is not a hedonist. He argues that any passions in excess can drag the victim down with the weight of their folly. However, he maintains that it is possible for the passions to become spiritualized. Christianity, on the other hand, emphasizes its discipline on extirpation. Its cure is castration. In other words, it attempts to remove the passion completely. It is too weak-willed to impose moderation upon itself. It is hostile to life. He also calls Schopenhauer's morality the denial of the will to live as the instinct of decadence itself. Nietzsche champions the spiritualization of love and enmity. Valuing one's enemies or opponents helps us to define and strengthen our own positions. These are great triumphs over Christianity. Nietzsche makes it clear that he does not want to eliminate the Christian church. He recognizes that his own philosophy would not be as necessary without it. However, the real blasphemy is the Christian rebellion against life, which is what Nietzsche attacks. He concludes that it is immoralists such as himself who must seek their honor in affirming, without valuing one person's approach over the others. In the chapter The Four Great Errors, Nietzsche lays out 4 mistakes of human reason regarding causal relationships that are the basis of all religion and morality. These errors are key for his Revaluation of All Values. The error of confusing cause and consequence, the error of a false causality, the error of imaginary causes, and the error of free will. Nietzsche denies the concept of human accountability, which, he argues, was an invention of religious figures to hold power over mankind. Do this and this, refrain from this, and you'll be happy. Otherwise, free will, Nietzsche thinks, has been invented essentially for the purpose of punishment, that is, of finding guilty. Thus, he rejects free will as a psychological error. Men were thought of as free so that they could become guilty. Consequently, every action had to be thought of as willed, the origin of every action as lying in the consciousness. The internal psychological states that we cannot consciously control, such as happiness, are the true causes of virtuous behavior, not the human will. In the next passage, The Improvers of Mankind, he proclaims that there are no moral facts. In all ages, one has wanted to improve men. This, above all, is what morality has meant. He calls these people improvers. The first example is that of religion, which corrupted the human being, weakened him, but claimed to have improved him. The second example is that of the caste system in India, attempting to moralize men by dehumanizing the Chandala, or so-called untouchables, who were at the very bottom of society. In What the Germans Lack, Nietzsche attributes the decline he sees in the sophistication in German thought to prioritizing politics over the intellect. Culture and the state are antagonists, and all great cultural epochs are epochs of political decline. Nietzsche also attributes this decline to the problem of higher education in his day. He argues that educators must teach 3 vital skills: seeing, the ability to think before acting on impulse, thinking, learned in the way dancing has to be learned, and speaking and writing. One has to be able to dance with a pen. All higher education belongs to the exceptions alone. One must be privileged to have a right to so high a privilege. Great and fine things can never be common property. In the longest chapter of the book, Expeditions of an Untimely Man, Nietzsche examines a variety of cultural figures of his day. He states that most have the vulgar ambition to possess generous feelings. Some notable passages mention the Apollonian and Dionysian ways of life, conceived as forms of intoxication. He also praises Dostoevsky as the only psychologist from whom I had anything to learn, as well as placing Napoleon and Goethe as ideal figures for the Übermensch. At the end, he writes, "My ambition is to say in 10 sentences what everyone else says in a book, what everyone else does not say in a book." In What I Owe to the Ancients, Nietzsche criticizes Plato and goes further to claim that Christianity is Platonism for the people in its harmful morality. At the end, he turns to the Dionysian lifestyle, to the eternal joy of becoming. I, the last disciple of the philosopher Dionysus, I, the teacher of the eternal recurrence. The last part of the book, The Hammer Speaks, is taken from Thus Spoke Zarathustra. And if your hardness will not flash and cut to pieces, how can you one day create with me? For all creatures are hard, harder than metal, nobler than metal. Only the noblest is perfectly hard. This new law table do I put over you, O my brothers, become hard.